All right, good evening. My name is Nada Vasugian, and I'm a professor of architecture here at the New York Institute of Technology. Thank you all so much for joining us. So we're here to celebrate the publication of Beyond the Envelope. And I'm really excited to be part of this celebration as, introducing our speakers. It was conceived by my colleague, my distinguished colleague, Tom Verebes, who also wrote the introduction in addition to coordinating the whole effort. And of course, it was kind of worked on and developed and conceived and processed in collaboration with our very own MArch students here at the New York Institute of Technology, they've been kind enough to join us. And it's both, I'm excited to be presenting this, this group, this panel, this evening's discussion to celebrate the book, really for two reasons. One is because it contains lots of daring and exciting projects, contemporary projects, and as a historian, I have a lot to learn on this account because I spend most of my time studying the distant past. But I think it's also really important and quite meaningful because it represents a collaboration between faculty and students. And that's, I think, a real tribute to Tom's investment in our students and as well as his own active engagement with what's happening in our field where architecture is concerned. So we're blessed to have the participants in this panel with us this evening. And so I'm going to introduce them, and I'd like to start with our guests. The first person I'd like to introduce is Ungjo Scott Lee. Is that correct? Thank you very much. So he's a partner at Morphosis Architects and heads the firm's New York City office. He was raised in São Paulo, Brazil. Does that mean you speak Portuguese? That's amazing. Cool. And he began his tenure at Morphosis in 1996 and has contributed to many of the firm's most significant projects, including the Bill and Melinda Gates Hall and the Bloomberg Center, the Net Zero LEED Platinum main academic building for the new Cornell Tech campus on Roosevelt Island in New York. And we really look forward to hearing perhaps more about that this evening. More recently, Scott oversaw the design and delivery of the Casablanca Finance City Tower, the first commercial high-rise in Casablanca, the new Judy Genshaft Honors College for the University of South Florida, and the U.S. land port of entry at Alexandria Bay. We're also joined by Jesse Reiser of Reiser & Umamoto RUR Architecture. This is an internationally recognized architecture office and design atelier. It was founded in 1986. Many of you probably know it already. But I think that, for the purpose of also just honoring our guests, it's important to still enumerate some of their many accomplishments here. So the office, of course, has been widely published, most recently in their sweeping monograph, Projects and Their Consequences, which traces 30 years of multidisciplinary investigations into form, structure, techniques, and planning. Awards and honors include the Chrysler Award for Excellence in Design, the Academy Award in Architecture by the American Academy of Arts and Letters, the Presidential Citation and John Haydock Award from the Cooper Union, and the USA Booth Fellowship from the United States Artists for Architecture and Design. In addition to running RUR Architecture, Jesse Reiser is a professor of architecture at Princeton University, and his partner, Nanako, is it Nanako? Nanako, excuse me. Umamoto is a professor of practice at Washington University and a visiting professor at Kent State University and co-founder of Reiser & Umamoto, as we know, RUR Architecture. Our in-house Participants for this evening, we start with, of course, my colleague, Tom Verebes. Tom is, of course, a professor here in the School of Architecture and Design. He is also director of Ocean CN, based in New York. He co-founded the distributed network practice Ocean in London, 1995, and he has since directed Ocean Off ICE's, excuse me. I suddenly feel like Will Ferrell in The Anchorman, sorry. He has since directed, good movie, by the way, Ocean offices in London, Hong Kong, Beijing, and New York. He has served as Associate Dean of Academic Affairs at NYIT. He was founding provost for Turintscape Academy in Beijing and Shishinan. Thank you. He was co-director of Design Research Lab at the Architectural Association in London, where he taught from 1996 to 2009, a very important and formative period in the institution's history. He was a guest professor at the Akademie der Bildenden Künste. I speak German, that's why I can pronounce it that way. In Stuttgart, the University of Pennsylvania, RPI, Syracuse, RMIT in Sweden, Singapore University of Technology and Design, and the University of Tokyo. The author of countless publications. His forthcoming book, so that's a book, a newer book than the one that we're about to discuss and celebrate, is called The Urbanism Reader, Design, Culture, Technology, and the Future of Cities. It will appear with Bloomsbury Press. Our students, we're really privileged and honored to have 4 of our alumni here with us who participated in the publication of this book. I'm going to start with Adam Giannios. Is that a correct pronunciation? Giannios, excuse me, Adam. He earned his master's here at NYIT, graduating magna cum laude. He serves as an adjunct professor at NYIT, where he teaches architectural visual communication and material tectonics, focusing on design software, materials research, and construction techniques. Currently, he is employed at HDR Inc. Alexandra Satorska, thank you. She was also a distinguished student in my seminar, incidentally. It was really a joy to see you again here. Is an architecture project manager and researcher and entrepreneur dedicated to advancing the integration of wellness and design, something that we can all benefit from in these times of tremendous unease. She earned a master's in architecture from NYIT and has received prestigious recognitions, including the Excellence in Interdisciplinary Research and Design. And she's been named among the Future 100 by Metropolis Magazine in 2021. Allison Iannucci graduated from NYIT from our MArch program in the spring of 2023, so 2 years ago. And at her commencement, she received the Gold Certificate for Excellence in Design. She is currently working full-time at Galen Beeler Design Studio in Westchester County, New York, as a junior architect, and will be on track to take the ARE exams beginning next fall. Dalton Lackey, is that correct pronunciation? Okay. Is an architectural designer with a passion for creating functional and innovative spaces. Currently an architectural designer too. Currently an architectural designer at AECOM. Dalton has been practicing architecture for over 4.5 years. His work in the transportation design, he works in the transportation design studio, focusing on projects for key clients such as the MTA, Amtrak, Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, as well as the Delaware River Port Authority. So please join me in welcoming the contributors to this exciting book and to this evening's events. Thank you very much. I'm really looking forward to being part of this.
I'm really welcome to everybody for joining today. Really grateful to have you all here. Let me get a hold of where are we here? Okay. The Beyond the Envelope project since 2021, it seems like it has gone on for 4 years almost continuously in many different ways. It's encompassed a graduate seminar as in 3 academic cycles, 2 public event series of presentations and interviews by architects on wonderful buildings within the context of my seminar, and the book that we had published that we're launching today. And this was all engaging very much in a mode of investigation of practice-based achievements in practice, and design-based disciplinary research in a pedagogic mode within the seminar. And this initiative has explored the discourses surrounding the conception of making of truly great architecture, positioning the architectural envelope as the lens of the investigation and as a site for experimentation at the intersection of design, technology, and culture. So the book investigates 21 built projects through their envelopes, examining form, materiality, production, performance, and effects. It moves beyond aesthetics to analyze how envelopes operate within a broader cultural, technological, and environmental contexts, revealing their role both as technical constructs and vehicles for architectural and cultural expression. I have a lot of thank yous to offer, and really a lot of gratitude to many people. Firstly, to Oscar Riera Ojeda Publishers, Oscar Riera Ojeda himself, the owner of Oro Publishers and their chief editor, book designer Florencia de Milano, copy editor Kint Maud, and Carrie Tang, who does their administration and distribution of books. Just a very general thank you to the former students, faculty colleagues, the Dean's Office, and administration at NYIT. I'll get more granular with the thank yous. There's quite a few to offer. The book was really made possible by an ISRC grant from the Office of Sponsored Programs and Research, OSPR, here at NYIT, which then enabled me to work with a research assistant, Tarin Asghar Bhaskaran, over a period of several months to bring the book to publication. I'd like to offer a warm thank you to Dean Maria Perbolini for unwavering support for my seminar, for the public event series, and as well for the book and for today's book launch. To Professor David Diamond, former director of the Master of Architecture program, for, in fact, believing in the format of the interviews and enabling that to go ahead for 3 years. To the School of Architecture and Design Lectures and Events Committee, our chair, Athena Papadopoulou, Andreas Theodoros, and Nader Vasugian, the co-chairs, and support from Janet Roddick, and also formally Sue Sternberg. Very importantly, I'd like to thank the 21 interviewees and their architectural practices for joining the interviews within my seminar and public events, and also then to provide photos and edit the interviews together. Really, truly grateful for all of the interviewees. I'll get more specific in a moment about our 2 guests here tonight. Our 34 Masters of Architecture students in 2021, 22, and 23. Grateful for all of the dedication and hard work that you've done in the seminar, and for all the work that goes into the book. As well, there are some additional sponsors for the book. 7 of the contributors to the book helped to make the book possible, just because the costs got a little bit, of course, more than they always are expected. So thank you very much. So the 34 Master of Architecture students, this is the group from 2021, 2, and 3. The classes got bigger, and we're joined today, as introduced by Nader, Adam Giannios, Alexandra Zatorska, Dalton Lackey, and Ali Iannucci. Thank you very much for joining us today. And the 21 pioneering buildings that the book investigates and the seminar investigated, this is, well, the list of the 21 in chronological sequence of when they were completed, and the 2 that will have presentations today by Jesse Reiser on the 014 Tower in Dubai, and Scott Lee on the Bloomberg Center at Cornell Tech. The 21 interviewees and architects We have Jesse Reiser joining us today. Unfortunately, Nanako Umamoto cannot join us from Reiser Umamoto, and Ungju Scott Lee, a partner at Morphosis. Thank you very much for joining us today. In 2022, these were the architects and interviewees in a public event series. And then in 2023, slightly larger group, 9 presenters in also a series of presentations and interviews. So in this matrix, ultimately, we surveyed 21 exceptional buildings from this current century, which is already about one quarter finished.
Oh my God.
Yeah, we're time's flying. Project 2025. The collection of projects, there are several cultural buildings, interestingly. There are also office buildings, residential buildings, a shopping mall, and a power plant. Their commonalities include how their envelopes speak to technological innovation and cultural expression, and they narrate the state of play of some of today's most innovative architectural practices through the analytical lens of cross-sectioning of these 21 envelopes. So we looked at, in the seminar and also in the book, the architectural envelope as a site for inquiry. And envelopes are more than facades. They express cultural, social, economic, and technological conditions of their making and their context. And this book examines how the skin of buildings serve as environmental moderators and mediators, as cultural artifacts with particular aesthetic expressions, and as evidence of technical achievements. The book and the seminar was focused on a mode of practice-based, design-based, and project-based research. They're grounded in built work, distinguishing this book from theoretical or speculative explorations. The book bridges academic inquiry and professional practice, highlighting contemporary experimentation in architecture with technology, materials, and their effects. The book is organized in 6 themes and chapters: form, matter, identity, environment, experience, and interaction. Each project is primarily categorized under one of those themes, but also analyzed across all 6. The themes: form. The first chapter explores formal logic, spatial articulation, and geometrical expression in architectural skins, examining geometry and topological conditions. It highlights how form shapes visual and spatial attributes through intricate design and impactful presence. Second chapter, matter, examines the interplay of materiality and massing in architectural envelopes, covering volumetric contours, material systems, structures, construction processes, and fabrication. It analyzes solidity, porosity, transparency, and translucency, revealing how materials influence construction processes and architectural effects. The third chapter, identity, analyzes modularity, components, and mass customization, focusing on part-to-whole relationships, subdivision, differentiated systems, topological variations. It explores how architectural identity is shaped by patterns, organizational structures, and material expression. The fourth chapter, environment, examines climate and energy in architectural skins, analyzing thermal performance, HVAC, ventilation, daylight, and sustainable systems. It explores how buildings behave dynamically, adapting to environmental conditions and energy demands. The fifth chapter, in experience, investigates the nuances of visuality, cognition, and immersion, and experiences in architectural envelopes. It examines visual programming of content, light, color, reflection, porosity, interactivity, revealing how these elements shape atmospheres, moods, and emotional impact. And finally, the last chapter, the sixth chapter, investigates the intelligence and augmentation in architectural envelopes through interactivity, robotics, sensing, and actuating systems. It discusses smart, responsive, and predictive technologies that enhance adaptability and architectural performance. So the Beyond the Envelope seminar Students analyzed projects and conducted interviews, generating a research database of analytical diagrams that form the foundation of the book, worked on over 3 years across the 21 projects. And the book and the seminar sees the interview as a methodology for research, interviewing with 21 architects, provided insights into design, construction, and material innovation. And the open-ended format of an interview allowed the discussion of challenges, intentions, unforeseen discoveries in the project, amusing anecdotes, and even some gossip. The book focuses on design, innovation, and technology in the 21st century. The book explores architecture at the frontier of design, production, and construction technologies. Projects range from digital fabrication to advanced material studies, demonstrating shifts towards a post-digital form of practice. And lastly, the architectural envelope is understood as a cultural artifact. The book fills a gap in literature by combining applied technology, theoretical implications, and architectural critique. The book is intended for students, for scholars, for practitioners, and it offers a roadmap for understanding innovation in architectural practice. The book will be available for, well, pre-purchase, but purchase afterwards. And if you were a student in the seminar, you'll definitely get a complimentary copy. Come see me after. But the work, the book does, through the 21 seminal projects, interviews, photos, and analytical diagrams, it aims to transcend formal aesthetics to and a monograph to position envelopes as performative, culturally, as embedded systems. Organized around 6 thematic frameworks, the study dissects how building skins operate as spatial mediators, integrating intent, design intent with material intelligence and environmental agency. The research anchored in realized projects foregrounds advancements in computational design, fabrication logics, technologies which recalibrate architecture as a mediated interface. The defining aspect of this inquiry is its engagement with the architects through structured dialogues, capturing the complexities of material innovation, tonic articulation, and emerging construction technologies. This approach of the interview and the diagrams, or the analytical approach of the diagrams and the interview, embedded the study as a pedagogic exploration, as an intersection with professional practice, rendering the seminar and also the book as a reference, and as a reference for students, theorists, and practitioners. The book aims to reframe the building envelope as a dynamic threshold, an intersection of technological progress, progression, environmental modulation. Sorry, I should have been running the slides of the book. Sorry, we're going to go through the whole book quite quickly right here. And so the book constructs the discourse on the evolving role of the 20th century architectural production with the lens of the envelope. As I mentioned, the book will be available for purchase afterwards. And if you were a student in the seminar, go a little bit slower for 014, a little bit slower, and we'll speed up again. And ultimately, I'm sorry, I should have ran this whilst I was speaking, and we would have been at the end of my short introduction. We're grateful for Jesse Reiser to be here today, and also Unju Scott Lee to present 2 of the projects. Here's the second of those projects, a little bit slower, not much slower, the Bloomberg Center in Cornell Tech. It's a building, I think I've probably taken the most photos of it, of any building in New York, because I live in Roosevelt Island and spend a lot of time walking past it, admiring the the coloration and different sorts of conditions of light. I'm sure, Scott, you'll be talking about that. We're close to the... And I think that's... There we are. Just a quote from a book review that was written by Catherine Logan in the Architectural Record, that if you can invite 21 of today's most brilliant architects to dinner or to a presentation, who would they be? And if you seated each luminary between a pair of architecture students primed on one of the architect's most significant works, what conversations might you overhear? Short of actually holding that imaginary gathering, beyond the envelope is as close as most of us will get, writes Catherine Logan. Beyond the envelope represents a significant contribution of first-hand accounts of some of the century's more compelling architecture, its ideas and processes, and it goes on. And instead of that imaginary dinner party, consider this book as an invitation to take your lunch to a park or order a glass of red at your neighborhood haunt. I think of it more as a whiskey book, personally. Yeah. You can order a glass of red and dip into a rich conversation. A little bit on the panelists and the format. The presenters and panelists Scott Lee will present first, partner at Morphosis, and Jesse Reiser, principal at Reiser Umemoto. Nader and I will moderate a panel, and the panel will be led by Adam, Alison, Dalton, and Alexandra. So, thank you very much for your patience with my brief introduction.
Thank you, NYIT. Thank you, Tom, for the opportunity to have our project to be a contributor to the book. We were just talking a little bit earlier that it's a great format for a book. It's part research, it's part almanac, it's part intimacy, and it's part providing the angle and the perspective of the students, which I think is really what you're trying to ultimately achieve, which is a slightly different perspective of how you look at the layers of buildings. You thematically split things into the 6 general buckets: form, matter, identity, environment, experience, and interaction. I would say that that in many ways, a building can be part of one of these things, but I'd say architecture would check all of the 6, you know, and what in some ways defines the work of these 21 projects, because whether it's Bloomberg Center or 014, that in many ways, and I think you speak about this in the book, that you could actually create a narrative for any one of these fluid kind of themes. But as a departure point, we start with the Bloomberg Center within the environment context, which really drove a lot of decision-making, the form, the site, the placement, relationship of urban space, and ultimately the architecture as well. So thank you. It's great to be here. Just a very, very quick introduction to myself. I'm not going to go speak more because I'm already exhausted from the introduction. Morphosis has several offices. I am a partner in the New York office. We also have an office in Culver City. If I can have you guys all come over, and if you're ever around by FIT 27 between 6 and 7, please stop by, say hello. You're all invited. We have a small studio in New York. The reason I wanted to show the image of our LA office is that we got a chance to purpose build our office. And one of these, speaking about envelope and facade, we have one facade that allows us to actually build full-scale mock-ups internally in our shop of all of our projects. I would say that scale is one of those things that's very difficult to understand. speaking with anyone, speaking with students, even for myself, understanding the size, the modularity, heights. We often work with very large project, millions of square feet somewhere, and what the hell does million square feet means for us? So I put these two things because, especially in the context of students and kind of understanding our built world, scale is in so many ways everything. And we see these kind of model making activities, the physical presence of actually building things and understanding their scale is key ultimately to translate into the actual buildings and the built environment as a very basic premise to everything that we do. They're continuous. So for your students out there, if your studio professor is asking you to do chunk models, take it seriously, because those are actually very, very helpful to understand in terms of detailing, in terms of their composition, and buildings are systems. So understanding how systems come together is essential to everything that we do. Very challenging. I think we have 20 minutes or so to talk about a building that goes on for many years in the making. I think, Jesse, we were talking about how one of your projects took 13 years. And here we are trying to like put it all down within 20 minutes. I would say that that's not atypical. Buildings take a long time. Because of that, we all as architects have a huge responsibility of what we leave behind and what the legacy is. And the legacy in many ways of the Bloomberg Center was part of a public space, of an incredibly, it's a very kind of tricky word to use in the context of a city, but it was a very idyllic place. Tom, you live there, so you can speak about this firsthand. How many of you have been to Roosevelt Island? Just curious. Okay, great. So maybe you will agree with me that I would say, as you get to the southern tip where there's the FDR Memorial, it's one of the most underrated public space in the entire city. And by the way, as you get to the southern tip of the island, you also pass the only landmark building in the New York area that is actually a ruin. Okay, the only one. It's a pretty magical place. So back in 2007, when Michael Bloomberg was the mayor, the existing hospital that you see in front of you was planned to be decommissioned. There were no more patients there. They were going to take it down, and they were trying to figure out what to do with it. And the Bloomberg administration at that time decided to make a competition for different universities to start a campus. And the thing that differentiated this campus and this competition was it was imagined to be the first tech campus in the tech age, an opportunity to really start a campus from scratch, which is a very rare opportunity, especially in the context of where we live in New York City, right? So it was a really, really big deal. Move forward a couple years, the hospital is now decommissioned. You see the overall site, which is about a 12-acre parcel of land. It was subdivided in roughly 2 halves. So what you see here is a cluster of building, about 5 buildings that comprises of phase 1 of Cornell University. Okay, very close to Queensboro Bridge. Again, incredibly idyllic, the best perspectives and the best views of New York City, in my opinion. Unless you're at the top of an observatory tower somewhere, maybe the top of the Empire States or something else, this is the best view to digest the New York City skyline. And you turn around and you have the incredible Queens skyline. Okay, so it was a tremendous opportunity to really create context and sight. And the project is a child of the 2 really particular things. It's the opportunity of this very specific siting. It's, again, huge responsibility towards creating a building that works as a campus, but also works within the urban context and the landscape around it. And 2, the performance aspect of the project. Everything here is for Cornell Tech, but the only building that Cornell built and paid and maintained is the Bloomberg Center, which is the first academic building in the campus. All of the other buildings that you see as phase 1 are third-party developers. So it's built by somebody else. They go into a venture with Cornell, but Cornell does not own it. It's a joint venture business partnership with them. Okay. So part of the performance when we were given the program was the Bloomberg Center will be not only the first academic building, but it will be the only building within the context of phase one that requires to be net zero. Okay. So the response that we had was immediate. It was immediately planned around these two very basic performance-driven requirements for us. So as we started thinking about the planning, the aspect ratio, the form factor, the requirements of net zero, the siting, the views, one of the things that we were very interested in is this relationship between dynamicism and differentiation. We were interested in the building that sort of reacted through its different times, different seasons, different lighting, different day lighting, different qualities throughout the year. And how does that impact the way that the building functions, the way that the building forms itself, the way that the building is organized? We did not want to work through something that was somewhat generic on the site because there were various requirements that require us to be sensitive around the views, again, relationship to the entry to the campus. We're talking about a building, but as much as it is about a building, it's about also entry into something that identifies the place as a school, as a campus. So there were many things that we're very interested in. So one of the, I'd say, really big driver and differentiator of many decisions was as we were thinking about the consumption of energy generation on site, we're clearly in a very urban setting. What we needed to really think through is the relationship between the urban setting, the form factor buildings, the density that we were required to put in the site, relative to how do you create energy on site, right? And these two things don't always sort of coexist. Because if you see the image of these like huge PV panels, it's all about surface area. The name of the game is the more horizontal landscape you have, the more energy you can produce. Unless one day somebody will figure out how to create energy besides solar panels, we wait for that day. That'll be a very exciting day. But up to now, the only way that we can produce energy on site is through solar panels. So we were really trying to kind of balance out the idea of the density, cityscape, development, but at the same time be able to create an opportunity to create on-site energy in order to sustain not only our building, but contribute to the rest of the campus as well. So when we were first brought into the project, there was already a cluster, a generic master plan, an idea. There was no program at that time. This was done purely as a massing study. Subsequent to this, we got the program, we understood what the net zero requirement was. It created a completely different strategy of how to organize the buildings and the buildings around it. And one of the things that was very clear to us from the beginning is, unlike other buildings, or unlike most typical buildings, this is a building that begins from top down. We really had to understand the roofscape. It's the Corbusian fifth facade. So speaking about the envelope, in our instance, the driver of many decisions for the building and contextually around it began with the envelope at the top level, and then we worked our way down in many ways. And we were very intrigued by this. We were very excited about this because we thought that it was an opportunity to create an identity to the campus, speaking about the other themes in the book. It was something that was environmental, but it was about form, and it also provided an identity, all guided by the requirement of surface. This kind of very large, we ended up calling it the lily pad, which then went through many iterations of its form. But the key name of the game was, how do we create energy on site, but how does that contribute to all of the other factors that creates a campus as a destination? So for us at this point, we were very, very, who cares about the building? Let's talk about the roof. Let's talk about the surface. Let's talk about what's high up. And by the way, there will be taller buildings around it. What's the disposition of the roof when somebody's looking down at this from the hotel? That for us was a very incredible, exciting thing. We love the idea that we would be starting to create a public space to which you kind of enter under. And it was also represented by the engineering behind the solar photovoltaic structure. So after many, many iterations, it began to take its form. Okay, so on the right is an image from the hotel. By the way, if you ever feel kind of tired and lazy, and you're an architect and you want to kind of geek out, you can go here and you can immediately see great buildings by Ojeda. There's a Handel, first largest, I believe, passive housing in New York City. Weisman Freddy has a building, Field Operations, Jim Corner did all the landscape, SOM did the overall master plan, and we have Morphosis, the first academic building. So you can just sort of do this and kind of see kind of the greatest hits of a few different kinds of things. Yes, you can do that at Hudson Yard, but this is much better. But the disposition of what the roof looked like from its adjacency was a very, very, very big deal. You don't get a lot of chance in New York City to actually have perspective of buildings that look like this, and we were very excited about that. Behind every slide, and perhaps this is where Beyond the Envelope Part 2 or Part 3, Tom, would come, there's so many stories about how this came about in the sense of, is the solar panel going to reflect so much light that it's going to disturb airplanes? If you have all these solar panels and there's a fire, how's the fireman going to attack the fire from above the roof and he's under this gigantic can? There are endless stories about those kinds of things that we had to just chip away. And the way that movie ends was an amazing collaboration between Cornell Tech, the local fire marshals, the local maintenance folks, the solar PV provider, Con Ed, because in order to get this size solar panel, we really had to satisfy each one of those things, which was an incredibly complex problem, but it was incredibly thriving educational problem for me, because at the end, I'll show you a few next projects that we're now cooking away after having learned from this experience. Yeah. By the way, solar panels are designed to absorb light, so they don't reflect light. So there's no issue with airplanes. There's a white paper. There's a lot of research based on that. So there's not an intrusion around that issue. The left-hand side was when we designed the solar panel canopy, we wanted it to be perceived as infrastructure. We didn't want to necessarily, we clearly didn't want to hide it. We were really, really curious about creating a solar panel that had all of the things that you could see from beneath and understand that it is about energy. You're conscious that there is something going on. So we like to have that to be perceived as part, again, as a contributing identity to the campus and the attitude of a campus towards how we use and consume energy. That was a really important item for us. But we also wanted to make it lyrical. We wanted to be looser. And we worked very closely with this edge idea. And every time that the canopy sort of spills itself or stretches itself, there's a reciprocal open terrace underneath it. And there's a response between sort of the lyrical shape of the canopy with a lot of structural work and coordination with the things that happens underneath it. So in this instance, with their piece sort of pops out, there is an open, large third floor terrace right underneath it. And then on this occasion, there's the public cafe just below it. So we were able to kind of stretch that moment. And every time the canopy stretches, it signals there's a public space or something going on underneath it. And we liked it because there was a looseness to that canopy. We called it, again, the lily pad. We wanted it to be about engineering, but we also wanted to respond to other things, including the articulation of form following some functions underneath it. I will point out that the solar panel, obviously with the PV panels in themselves are taking the energy. We're able to on-site create renewable energy, but also the first layer of sustainability is the fact that it's essentially a sombrero. It's like an umbrella. So we are already shading the building in itself through that, because we needed to articulate all those passive gains of the solar panel, because if you don't acknowledge that, your energy model gets thrown off. So that really affected deep understanding of every scenario of how we consume energy. We got to the point where we were talking about, are the users working on laptops or do they actually have desktops? Because the energy consumption is very different from those two things. Is there a server room? Is there another server room? So there was an amazing amount of programming understanding, because the first layer of sustainability and net zero has to be about decreasing energy consumption. Only then do you start implementing sustainability features, because there's not enough money to add sustainability feature if you're just consuming a lot of energy. So we had to be working very closely with the end user to recognize that. Okay. So again, these are all of these like little fragment moments where the engineering side of the PV panel becomes, again, part of more of an architectural lyrical form that we really appreciated. This is probably one of the moments where the canopy really extends itself, because this is the beer garden on the second floor. So this is where Cornell Tech, Friday afternoon, everybody breaks, and then there's a private little roof garden where they kind of break out, and that's all shaded from the solar panel up above it. And again, we love thematically that every time you're in a public space, you're always connected to that array, to that canopy above you. So that's the roof. Now, surface envelope facade. The transparency was incredibly important, not only for the obvious things of daylighting, people working on computers, so glare was a big issue, but glazing was very important because we wanted to, as you're moving through the building, always connect the user to the campus. You're part of a campus. So we located strategically the community stairs, and where we had the community stairs is where we put the glazing, because going back to really decreasing consumption, we had to use glass very diligently. We did not want to make an all glass building. We couldn't start there. Okay. So the metric for us is how much glass can we really reduce? So we try to be less than 40% generally, but without affecting the impression of transparency, of openness, of daylighting, of permeability. And ultimately, that required us to really think hard about where we put the glass. Okay. So where we put the glass is any space which was communal, where you're meeting together or you're moving through the building and there's an opportunity to see back to the campus, is where we put the glass currency. Where you have more private offices or where you don't need that connection is where we put the very opaque walls with incredibly thick R-value walls, right? That was really the name of the game. So this is I find this image helpful just because, again, it shows that it's not an all-glass building. We did have to be fairly diligent, even on the kind of ribbon glazing, how high it was above desks. We had to be fairly stringent about that. We definitely put a lot of glazing on the ground floor because we needed, again, to connect back to how people were moving in the campus. We wanted to see some level of transparency. So that was a starter for us, glass at the bottom level showing the glazing. And as you move to the interior of the building, it even affected how we designed the inside. Because we have very low currency of glass, we needed glazing, daylighting. So the permeability of light deep into the building was a really, really important factor for us. So I would say that as you're moving through the building, you feel like you're in an all-glass building. But that's only because we were able to really calibrate where the glazing was, which side it was facing, and the ability to really bring glass interior of the building to allow for that very deep openness. It's sort of a fake permeability. It's a little bit of a fake daylighting, but very effective because, again, we had to maintain that sort of 60-40 ratio or better to make the metrics of the net zero really work. So again, this is the atrium. This is the big kind of moment where you're connected to 57th Street. So again, that's where we really incorporate a lot of daylighting. By the way, it's a little bit tough to see, but there is a Matthew Ritchie art installation right there, because that was the art in architecture that was so important for the building. It also allows for areas of curiosity as you're moving through the building. And that's where we put the lighting in. And again, where you have offices and more private spaces, much more opaque, okay? Narrower windows, you don't have large groups moving around, incredibly highly detailed wall sections, no thermal bridging, insulation outboard of the cavity wall. Everything was unitized, so very high quality control from both Zahner, the metal fabricator, and Island, who was the facade fabricator. I'll show you a few pictures of the actual making side of it. And then that's the glass, and then the opaque portion with the patterning. Okay, I love this picture. It's like a horizontal bench looking at a horizontal building beyond. And I love this picture because it really summarizes the fact that we were really interested in understanding the building as a piece of infrastructure, like the Queensboro is a piece of infrastructure. We didn't want it to look like a piece of architecture per se. Okay, it was a building that really just talked about what happens in it, how it sort of produces energy, and whether it's here or there. It's just like the bridge. If it's 200 years from now, you sometimes maybe not be interested that it's kind of there, but it kind of exists because it's an infrastructure that's part of the city. Okay, the towers can do whatever they need to be. That can be whatever attitude of architecture you have, that's what you had. But this was a really, really valuable piece of infrastructure. However, there is a moment of discovery. As you get closer to the building, the facade unveils itself a little bit more because there is these moments of refraction on the facade created by this really incredibly teamwork-driven facade manufacturing process that we worked through. So again, the building from far looks like something. As you get closer at this level, it looks like something else. And then as you get closer, you kind of really understand, oh, wow, it's actually made up of these like little voxels, you know, these little pixelated things. The lighting, when it hits it, depending on the time of the day, looks a little bit different on different sides of the panel. Different seasons changes the color too. We use a particular PPG coating that's iridescent, so the actual paint itself is color shifting. So sometimes it's green, and it goes really nicely with the water of the East River. If you're looking from the other angle, it looks like bronze, just like the bridge. So it can kind of mask itself, its landscape and building at the same time. And you get this incredible resolution as you get closer. And what we were trying to do is that you have to experience the building and you have to get to it. You can see it from far, it's infrastructure, but you understand the building differently as you sit in front of it and kind of understand what the pixelation of the facade really does for you and how it works with the daylighting and how it treats the refraction of the daylight. This was to us really, really important because if you walk in certain times of the day, let's say near Hudson Yard, I actually get hot. Reflection from the curtain wall. I feel it. I walk half a block up and it's actually cool again. This one, because we have the pixelation, it diffracts the daylight, so you never get blinded by it, and it helps really lower the urban heat quality of the area's adjacency. We thought that was very important because, again, it's a communal space, it's a park space, it's used all around the year, and we absolutely did not want to increase the heat island effect around it, and especially across into the other buildings. A few last slides. Again, I could probably go on for many hours, but I gotta get Jesse up here. There were so many testings, so many mock-ups. Here I am. The gentleman here is Anthony Battaglia, Cornell guy. He he scripted this whole thing. He's the guy who made all these things work. We started with small prototypes. This is at the rooftop of my office. We were just trying to understand, what is this gonna look like when you're far? And what does it look like when you're close? We had no idea. We were just mocking it up, like you're mocking up and studying, no different than studio that you guys do probably every day. It was so difficult. Every time we submitted this to the city, because it needed to have New York EDC approval, they were like, we need a rendering of the color of the facade. And we were like, but it kind of changes. And it depends on which pixelation. They're like, what are you talking about? Are we just give me the, there were so many things like that, which we really had a hard time responding, to the point where we really simulated everything down to each pixel. Again, Anthony kind of working through this different pixelation. This is a rendering. After we sort of created proof of concept, we now had to understand where is this pattern coming from? What is it? We have the scripting and we can transfer some kind of coding to this panelization, but what's going to be the base image that's going to do that? So basically we took this is a plan of our building. One side faces New York City. The other side faces the inner side of the campus. The city view, we took an image of Manhattan as you see it from actual location. The landscape view is, Ithaca is gorgeous, right? Ithaca is all about the creeks. It's about the little waterfalls. We took an image of the gorges. We translated that into a black and white image. Then the scripting command then alternated that to codify the panel. And essentially, it's a pixelation. Depending on the grayscale, it will tilt the little pixel and then turn it into the page, okay? So you cannot see it, the image literally, but if you had the photo and you look at it, you could see the patterns of the image in grayscale with the relationship with the actual pixelation, okay? This is at Zaner. These two gentlemen here are Zaner project managers working through the series of different mockups. You can see how much the different photographs affect the grain. So this was the Ithaca photo side. This was the New York City side. And we took one that was sort of in between because we wanted to see the quality of the intensity. Is it going to really kind of wig you out when you see all these patterns? We wanted to prove that. So there was a lot of these mockups. Looking at daylighting, kind of monitoring how lights behave. We kind of figured it out. We really felt good about it. And then we said, okay, how do you build that at scale? We just need like 6,000 panels now, right? Like, how do we actually do that? So it was an all hands on deck on using a robot to actually begin to turn all of those little things. So the wonderful 20-second story on this one was Zaner, which is the metal fabricator in Kansas City. They were trying to figure out, we definitely need a robot. We can't do this manually, obviously. You know what? We have this old welding robot arm that nobody uses. It's like collecting dust. It's in a closet. Let's fire that baby up. Let's print a 3D printed head that's kind of like a nozzle. Let's get the old dog and retrain him and maybe see what he's going to do. Next thing you know, this thing is going on for months. We translated the image with the script. We were so nervous because this guy was kind of old, and if this thing went down, we would be in deep trouble. But I like to tell that story because a lot of people, when they look at the facade, they're like, "Wow, this is like so technological. It's so like it's amazing." Robot. No, it was like a welding. You probably have here downstairs, maybe somewhere. It's just a scripting command, and it's all actually available to you now. You know, there's just like a very, very, it's just accessible tools that you probably find in almost any shop these days at school, which then you can kind of translate, retrain it, repurpose to be able to do things at this scale. Okay, so I find this incredibly cool and promising for that. We figured out scale. Now we got it. We know how to generate thousands of these panels. And then it was just about unitizing. This is inside the island shop. This is Eileen Weingarten. She was the project CM. Jerry Figurski from my office, Michael Sericino from Bar and Bar. We're now beginning to put these things together, doing dynamic testing, water tests, smoke tests, making sure that everything at this level is now, this is a stack joint where the two unitized panels come together. This is more of the traditional stuff that everybody goes through testing. It went through all that sort of rigorous testing, installation, very difficult to bring things into Roosevelt Island. There's only one way in. If that bridge goes down, it's a very difficult problem. We had to coordinate with the local community on the time of access when trucks can come in and how they get out. Luckily, we had a barge, so we barged a lot of things because we wanted to take some of the noise and pollution out from Roosevelt Island. So there was a lot of work with the community on that. And then lastly, this image I like because it's got a couple different variations, kind of showing how the light and the same texture, the same color works differently depending on where you are and how you're positioned. And you probably have many variations of this experience as you go through the years and the months. The always heroic shot, that's by now kind of boring for us. So what's next? So for us, we're now looking, having kind of done that work, we're working on a few projects now in the office where we're looking at the same concept of the fifth facade, the roof, as energy generating. But now we're looking at it also as being water neutral. That's our next challenge. So our concept is to be able to provide a building that is creating its own energy and it's actually consuming all of its own water, and it's a closed loop circle. We're looking through different geometries. As we funnel the water, it's going to come through a series of what we call cylindrical gardens. And from there, it's going to be sort of reused as a concept. So we're pretty excited about this one. The two projects we're looking at implementing, that one is a horticulture innovation center. And the other one is actually a train station where we're looking to deploy this kind of water neutral, energy neutral idea. And we're hoping that with some good luck and a lot of hard work and coordination that we can get there. Thank you.
Well, thank you for inviting me here to discuss the O14 project. Scott, it was a really exciting presentation, and it brought to mind a lot of things that we encountered on the O14 project. I think one of the things, and yeah, I should thank Nader and Tom. But I think this project was initiated almost 20 years ago. And so the state of the technology, was far less mature. There was a lot more kind of speculative and experimental work to be done, even on kind of banal issues. And so I guess my account is going to be pretty nonlinear in terms of the development of the project, because there was a lot of trial and error in O14. I think would be of interest to many of you. And there were also conclusions that I made, because I'm sort of inclined to theorize our work mainly after we do the project. That's my approach, actually. It's not so much about preconceiving theory, but that the work actually is supposed to tell you something. I think something Peter Cook once said as well in relation to drawing. But in any case, let me just jump into it. We had the opportunity to become involved in a major competition in Dubai for a new kind of business center in a place called Business Bay. And this, again, this is kind of old, but you can see the almost tabula rasa condition in 91 and where Dubai was in 2005. I apologize, I don't have contemporary images, so this is like 20 years ago. But anyway, there were enormous numbers of master plans generated for the various sub-cities within Dubai. This is Business Bay. I think it was one of the large kind of British engineering companies did the master plan for this. And a young developer who worked with a company called Dubai Properties, Shahab Lutfi, created this competition to look at, you see the kind of central, within the center of the circle, they wanted a kind of central building for Business Bay for stock trading and various other kinds of office functions. And so that was the theme of the competition that got us involved in the project. When we got to the site, this is what, we encountered. That little red flag was to be the center of the circle. So just an amazing sort of contrast between the ambitions of the renderings versus the state of the site. Of course, that's changed. That, OMA was involved. They were among the people in competing. And they already kind of developed a sort of propaganda campaign prior to the submission of the works. And I guess they included work that they thought the other architects competing would have produced. So for us, they didn't really know. So it was the United Architects, our collaborative tower, but then Tom Main and then various other architects, Zaha, to kind of show what he would probably consider to be somewhat exuberant and maybe ridiculous formalism that was going on at the time. And then these were ultimately the project submitted, the OMA tower, which was a kind of sliver that rotated on a kind of a central axis. Zaha Hadid's dancing towers, which ultimately won the competition. Morphosis's Burj Al Maidan, which Tom sent me much later. He was very reluctant to show me that. And then our project. This was for an 84-story mixed-use tower. So half of it would be office, half residential. And it was to contain, all of these kind of civic functions as well, but as well as a stock exchange. So it was, huge 84-story project. We didn't win. Shahab Lutfi was impressed with our scheme, and he at that point was about to start his own development company. So he asked us to submit a design for his first project. And what he wanted, in effect, he loved the formal development of the 84-story tower, and then asked us somehow to incorporate that kind of development in a 22-story mixed-use building. So we went through, I believe, at least 16 iterations, which really didn't work. The project was mixed use, so it was to be in the first beginning of this project, residential office at the base, and then it would kind of break into separate sub towers for residential. We finally did a first kind of concentrated iteration for the mixed-use version with a curtain wall, and it started as a more amorphic base, more maybe like an alto vase, and then kind of developed into a soft cruciform. Ultimately, Shahab jettisoned the residential component, and we went entirely to office only. We, at the same time, could convince Shahab that really those overly developed forms, from the 84-story building could simply not work. So we decided on a cruciform plan, and then also voiced our objection to what we saw as a kind of standard response from foreign architects in Dubai. And at that point, it was, always wrap the building in a curtain wall. So that suddenly opened up a lot of really interesting possibilities for us. A bit of a detour. We were, already for probably a decade working on projects that looked at kind of particular use of materiality in relationship to geometry. And I just kind of show this as a spectrum of kind of issues of materiality. I guess in the extreme, on the one side, you would find like, Todd and Billy's Folk Art Museum. It was about the literal kind of materiality of those panels, that they were supposed to ground you. They would be an antidote in a way to the placelessness that they perceived in modern architecture. And on the other extreme, in the Asymptote project, a will to dematerialization. These are all material projects, but very different forms of material expression. So we find ourselves in a way, if they're in a spectrum, we're off in the middle on a tangent somewhere in terms of where we would be going with this notion of geometry and materials and the relationship, so forth. And also the question of the presence of the building, because, and this is a kind of illustration from what Walter Benjamin, the kind of the theorist and philosopher, talks about nature as producing the effect of a distance. And in this case of Fuji, it's kind of really about awe. We were interested in trying to create a very different kind of sense in the context of Dubai of, how the building would work with its context. So in ways, a kind of dance between the artificial and the natural, that it at some level might be perceived as a huge desert kind of plant. And at the other side, of course, would be related, to the towers around it, because it would become, one element in a very densely packed kind of urbanism. Our methods were, extremely iterative. And there were two, I guess, controlling issues for us. We worked with our former professor of structures, Israel Sinek, on this, but we at once wanted to kind of work with a diagrid structure that would be highly varied and therefore vary the openings. And we also, in doing these experiments, we're really trying to break any obvious pattern that would, that the eye could find traveling down the face of the building. So it was almost a kind of, the forces in a way would drip down the building. There would be a kind of indirect force path down the diagrid, and it would finally be received by a rational organization of columns that were part of the parking structure, a grid. And another kind of cultural idea would be that we wouldn't want this issue of context or trying to produce something local. We didn't want to go the Zelig route, or you could almost call it, almost the work of a foreigner trying to do local context, as in this the cultural center, but rather another comedian, the Chance the Gardener, who basically people read their own meanings into him, even though he was really just a simple gardener. So, rather than making kind of obvious references to the local culture, we do find, though, that the development of reticulated structures crosses cultures. So there's a kind of slippery way of working, using the notion of a reticulated structure that might resonate at some level to any local. And even, you know, there were basket weave aircraft like the Wellington, which is one of my favorites. Equally, you know, also, you know, biological form, bone. There's an essay that Sanford Quinter wrote about the lacuna canalicular development of living bone. That really interested us too, that, you know, it wasn't about a mechanical diagrid, but that it was, you know, highly varied and could be influenced at will, both for functional, but also for aesthetic reasons. And other people have pointed out that there are resonances as well to Melnikov's house, which I love. So I'm kind of going back again and again to issues that have been disparaged in schools of architecture. The issue of expression and expressionism is really important to me. It's something that shouldn't reflexively be dismissed. And, you know, of course, one could say any architecture has some degree of expression. So, you know, of course, the modernists had the skin and bones. There are expressionisms, you know, that mainly deal with the muscularity of the structure and the kind of heroics. And then again, we find ourselves in an interesting in-between space where, in a way, there's a kind of aesthetic dimension to the look of the thing, like a cosmetic, but at the same time, it has a performance dimension as well. And then there are, you know, all kinds of interpretations that we don't need to put on it, but this is what happens. Another thing that was of great interest to me, because I spent a year in Rome many, many years ago at the Academy, was a strangeness of the pyramid in Rome, where you really didn't know, especially in a kind of smoggy day, how big that pyramid was. It ended up being relatively small, Pyramid of Cestius, I believe. But from certain distances, it appeared immense. And so we were very interested as well in defeating easy readings of scale in the tower. And that also motivated our, you know, the variation, much like the variation of features you would see in this, you know, in this toad. So there was the challenge then of, you know, dealing with the regularity of the floor plates and their heights, and then how a highly variable facade would intersect them. And there were kind of constant commentary about it as well, people trying to guess from the renderings. But this is an unrolled drawing of the facade. And if you see these sort of dashed lines, those are what we call the tongues. They basically connect back to the floor slab. So there's a, you know, also constantly shifting depending upon the variability of the holes and their spacings, but they also allow air to travel from the top of the facade to the bottom. Very different, obviously, from a curtain wall concept. And we were, again, interested in the aesthetic dimension coming out of pop art, where you, because of the kind of vacillations and the contractions, you had a strange feeling of movement or potential movement when you got up close, especially in the oblique, that you couldn't really read where the floors were, that's for sure. Multiple views, breaking horizons. There was an unfortunate, and thank God we got through this, but a debate with the builder who wanted to turn the diagrid horizontal. So you would get, I guess, a kind of Vierendeel, but it lost all its dynamism, and we fought like hell and succeeded in not having that happen. But also the uncanny kind of relationship at that time, I think probably less so today, but because renderings of this type, you know, were first coming to the scene, the strange relation between the rendered object and then the kind of notion of a built rendering. So this simple animation actually shows the process of iteration as we developed the patterns, both functionally, because we had to follow the parameters set up by the structural engineers about how big the holes would be and how close together they would be and how much they could drift. So there were, hard constraints there, but an incredible amount of latitude. And this is something important to me to talk about tonight, because I fear that there's also a kind of positivism related to this kind of work, which, people put forward as arguments to justify the work. But in fact, even with all the parameters, we had a lot of freedom to kind of work with the placement of the holes. And in fact, there was also an abandonment at that point of a scripted version of holes. We had an Australian architect, Roland Snooks, in the office, who did amazing work, automating the drawing sets and so forth. And then he wanted to help us by automating kind of scripting of the gradients of the holes. And why I have David Burns, because he said something about this, that for a musician, in order to keep the performance alive, you never kind of follow the rules exactly or hit the notes exactly in the score, but the vitality is playing around, those constraints, not abandoning them, but that there's a kind of play around the constraints. And I thought that was exactly what was going on. Interestingly, Tom just kind of concluded that we were interested in randomness. He thought we were, kind of crazy. But we finally used Photoshop. We use all kinds of techniques to adjust, the holes and the gradients so to break the kind of deadness that we found in the scripts. Anyway, this was another thing that Guy Nordenson and his students did that I found really interesting. He did an analysis of the steel in the old trade center, of all of the alloys used by Yamasaki with Les Robertson. And the interesting part here was that there were a whole, and I can't remember all the alloys, but there were a whole range of strengths, all chosen in order to keep the facade totally regular. And I realized that in some sense, we were doing the opposite. We were trying to push variation, whereas Yamasaki used differences in strength in the materials to keep, all of the members the same. So that, that seemed like a really interesting area. A quick detour, I hope I'm not boring you, but our structural engineer, Israel Sinek, was our teacher for 4 years at the Cooper Union. He was an amazing teacher and designer, but he also had an incredible history. He worked with the mafia boss Meyer Lansky in Cuba to do a series of the most famous, modernist hotels before the collapse of the, what was that, Batista regime. And then he came to America. Yeah, he's also Hyman Roth. If you've seen Godfather 2, is Meyer Lansky. He came to America and continued with some well-known figures who I won't even mention, and designed the building across the street. They kind of converted that. But he was an incredibly dynamic character. He really sold the 014 Tower, not us. We were to the lineup of sheiks. The other conversation I had with Guy Nordenson, because he was working with Stephen Hall at the time, and he was my colleague at Princeton, was that in order to really get beautiful castings, it should all be precast. And then I said, well, we want this to be, an exoskeleton. So, well, you can do moment connections and it will function as an exoskeleton. And that's another principle that I think you know, as an architect, I guess I make the decision like, yes, both will perform, but then the precast will have seams, and so it will look like there are columns behind it. It will look that way. So I don't really buy into pure performance-based arguments either, because, you know, in a sense, there are other cultural things going on, and or even just, you know, what people imagine they see that equally fit into the architectural, you know, questions. So it's a 22-story office tower, no columns. There is a gap of 1 meter between an interior window wall, not a curtain wall, which just, you know, goes from slab to slab. And then the outer concrete shell. The meter gap was originally for the window cleaning, so you could clean the window wall. So notionally, this is not real, but the columns move out of the normative tower and then spread and become an external shell. Sinek described its performance as a shell similar to a cooling tower, reactor cooling tower. It would be very strong, and it would allow the core to become fairly light because it could take all the lateral forces as well. This is an isometric of the, I guess it's like the 4th level. The shell goes from, I think, 600 millimeters to 400. And so it there's a really interesting detail, which you might be able to see, you know, where the kind of detail around the holes going from one thickness to the other. We originally had it as a taper, but it would have been prohibitively expensive to cast that way. So anyway, as a result of that gap, of the 1 meter gap, you get a stack effect, which we were told by our MEP engineers would reduce cooling costs in the range of 30%. And this is the gap from below. And then an animation of how that works. And I forgot to bring the film, but there is a film of an exercise club that uses the space underneath O14 because there's a continuous breeze actually generated by the building under there. And it's pretty hot and muggy in July. So I want to kind of circle back again and talk about the development of this whole section of this envelope. In the beginning, we studied putting glass right in the holes. And we came to realize, both because of cost considerations and aesthetics, that, you know, because you would get these thick frames, there would be costly issues about kind of doing neat glazing. It was something I just didn't want to do. And so this gap actually came about, and this question of what, you know, of the, you know, separating interior and exterior came about as a result of an aesthetic problem and cost problem rather than from the beginning a sustainability problem. The other thing that we were, you know, arguing with the client, not as a bad thing, but just that this would be a very different kind of office tower. Inland steel building, which I love, still in the 60s, it was much more about kind of regulating and storing paper and processing paper, and that the O14 building ideally could be much freer in its plan because you didn't have all of that paper storage anymore, and people could move about, so they wouldn't be in the George Tooker hell, but that rather you could organize desks on an open kind of work floor according to preferences about light and dark. And since the envelope varied, there would be a different way of thinking about organizing. We were also, went through a lot of work on trying to rationalize the formwork for the building, the 5 different scales of holes, each of, many of which didn't fall on flat surfaces, or were kind of partially crawling over curves. So it was very challenging. We did an exercise as well. Again, this was early on and everything, trying to argue for custom molds to reduce the number of molds. Ultimately, it went to the Beijing Formwork Company. They decided not to do reusable molds. These were all waste molds. They were all, kind of automated wire cut on site and then broken out, of the cast. And it was really a learning process because on the first levels, these foam molds, especially at the bottom of the pour, began being compressed. And so they began deforming. And so then there was you're seeing the second level. At that point, they put melamine strapping around those foam forms, and they would resist the pressure of the concrete. So the bottom is much more handmade looking. They had to grind back manually. Some of them are really funny. But as we went up, it took less and less time to pour a floor. Still, I'm sure, slower than most conventional buildings. And then this is the shell, as it comes, it emerges, off the roof. Yeah, I can just flick through. I've been going way too long. Some images. And one last thing. The trajectory of the work, because we carry these concepts through to other projects, we took what we learned from the O14 project, and then when we were invited to the Shenzhen airport competition, basically turned that concept on its side, worked with a big vault, and then added the complication and the variation of instead of the holes being normal to the concrete shell surface, they then inclined and could produce different atmospheres and also kind of sight lines within the airport. So it continued. And then there was another tower for Mexico City, which we also made a proposal for. So that concludes my part of it.
Maybe I'm gonna start again. Once again, thank you so much for amazing presentations and definitely going a little bit further than we went in the book and presentation that was during the interview. And first, I would like to ask, maybe before that, I have a little small digression that I would like to emphasize that, in my opinion, the greatest buildings one can recognize by the amount of thought put behind every detail. In both presentations, we could see the spectacular interconnectedness and relationship between the envelope, interior, user experience, and environment. And going to that, I would like to ask you, Jesse, since 2010, there's been a significant shift in building technology and climate responsive architecture. If you were to design the O14 today, considering the latest advancements in these areas, what improvements or innovations might you incorporate? Yeah. Something with AI, maybe?
Well, I think one of the things that wasn't so much in discussion then was even, the question of concrete, or, how we could work in concrete. Although Forrest Meggers, the environmental expert at Princeton, tells me that in many centuries, all of the concrete will absorb all the CO2. So it's actually a saving grace in the far, far future. But No, seriously though, I think we would have to question use of concrete. What else? Thermal breaks weren't present in that building. And again, Forrest tells me, well, it's less in the climate of Dubai. Thermal breaks are less crucial than if you were doing this building in Northern Europe when there was heating. But still, I think that would be something. And I've seen products now where they can do, thermal breaks with moment connections. So, I mean, there are things like that that I would certainly reconsider if we were to embark on an 014 type project again.
Yes, thank you.
So the 014 building is a truly striking modern landscape, modern skyscraper in that landscape, excuse me. It stands out in Dubai's Business Bay district as one of its great icons. How do you think that building has influenced the design of other projects in the district or the region as a whole? And how's it influenced your own work since 2011?
I really can't speak so much to the influence of 014 in Dubai. I don't see too much of it, honestly. I may be wrong. Certainly for us, we see 014 as part of a continuum of project that there's, a specific project that you're working on, but then we feel it's very important that architects have sustained projects, that continue past just that particular set of problems and the client and site. So, as I said, the airport and then the Mexico Tower and a few other projects, continued in the lineage of 014.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have one more question. Yeah, so also I'm interested in post-occupancy analysis. You mentioned about the hypothesis that structural engineers stated about the reduced cooling effect by 30%. And I was wondering, have there been any insights gained regarding thermal regulation, spatial flexibility, maybe human experience, that either validated or challenge your initial design intentions?
Well, I mean, I think I don't have any, kind of post-occupancy data on the effectiveness of the of the stack effect and the cooling. So, I mean, it's more anecdotal. I'm told that the spaces are cooler, and then of course there is the stack effect that does induce a continuous breeze underneath. So people are using it and they're experiencing it. But to be perfectly clear, there wasn't a post-occupancy analysis that at least made available to me. What was the other part of the question? It was
that was the main one. I was
I think-
wondering about the thermal regulation as well as maybe user
Yeah.
human experience. We are not users,
I mean,
we
the
are
other thing
humans.
was cultural.
Mhm.
That we were making claims which we still believe would be totally possible to effect by the tenants. But I think the tenants also had very conventional ideas of how they would want, how they want to subdivide their spaces. So there was, I would say, two spaces were more in keeping with the spirit of kind of the freer plan. But most of them, subdivided offices in a fairly conventional manner, which was, possible to do, but yeah.
So it went a little bit against the intention. Yeah, it
Right.
went, yeah,
I
interesting.
mean, of course, it's, once they leave, maybe someone in the future when technology gets even lighter.
Mhm. Who knows?
Yeah, but other architects have experimented with this. I mean, this kind of question of the move from a paper-based sort of office to one that was,
More
digital
flexible.
and flexible. Yeah. So it's there waiting.
Yeah.
So, first of all, I want to personally thank you, Tom, for giving us this opportunity. It was a privilege and an honor to be part of this book as your student. Thank you, both of you, being here, taking the time. Mr. Lee, I had prepared a great question, but your amazing presentation covered it. So I'm going to my second question. No. So the Bloomberg Center is, as you mentioned, situated on Roosevelt Island, which is home to the Four Freedoms Memorial, which is one of my favorite architectural spots in the city. How did you approach the design of the building to ensure that it respects and complements the historical and cultural significance of Louis Kahn's Four Freedom Memorial, if you did, particularly in terms of sightlines, scale, and public accessibility? And maybe you can tell us, how does the building contribute to the larger narrative of the island's public space, since you mentioned, again, very detailed and beautifully on the actual building?
The way we created that, the way that we created the general organization of the building, and I have to give a lot of credit to the master planner, which was SOM. We had an initial, or SOM had an initial planning for the overall campus. But again, it was before the competition ended. A lot of it was just kind of theoretical land use. After we formulated the aspect ratio, the program, then it's a little bit like a sweater. The sweater's got to stretch a little bit here and there. So interesting conversations with SOM. The way we connected the overall campus to the FDR is by really not doing anything. And what I mean by that is, the moment that you enter Roosevelt Island as a visitor, you're either taking the metro or the subway. And the idea, it was simply of porosity. We didn't want you to go through the building to get to the other side. We wanted to move around the buildings, and that space between the buildings framed the experience from the bridge all the way to the FDR in a more singular kind of way. So there was a lot of nuanced way to kind of solve that. In some ways, the FDR, when you come to it, is a final destination. But before you get to the final destination, you go through a series of pocket of public spaces that happens to be inside Cornell Tech. But you're really not aware of that. There isn't a gateway, there isn't a door, there's not necessarily a threshold. There is a cluster of buildings, but the buildings are there, including the Bloomberg Center, only to frame that walkway generally. You can walk right through the middle of the campus. Some people don't even realize it. Or you can preserve the amazing cherry blossom roads on the two edge of the Roosevelt Island too. And we went through a fairly stringent discipline not to muck that up, because that was just kind of beautiful. It's just a very simple thing, and just to give clarity and the visibility of New York City and Queens is really what we try to maintain. So I call it more of a passive strategy, but there was a lot of thinking about that because again, it was we wanted to maintain the porosity, but at the same time create the identity of the campus. And much like Cornell in Ithaca, which is defined by quads, the history of 1897 Cornell Ithaca, it was organized around schools. Every school, art squad, engineering, architecture, they all have their own quad. It's the same thing here. There's a quad here that forms Cornell Tech, but it's part of the public experience of Roosevelt Island, and it belongs to the place. Yeah.
First, I want to thank you both for coming and for your amazing presentations. I think I'm in the same boat as Adam. You did address some questions I had, but I definitely want to talk about transparency. I know you touched on that, and especially balancing transparency with the net zero mission. So the building's exterior articulates a balance of transparency and opacity through its perforated facade and intentional glazing. While the interior spaces are overlapped and integrated primarily through transparent elements, guardrails, interior windows, partitions. In your experience, melding tectonic elements that are opaque and thermally well-performing with aesthetic elements that are transparent and more compromising, would you say that a net zero building makes demands on architecture to prioritize thermal protection, which in turn results in a less transparent envelope? That's my first question. And then with these demands in mind, would you say that the interior of the Bloomberg Center caters to an aesthetic and or function-based expectation to offset the energy-based expectation?
I think the answer to the first one is yes, there's absolutely a form that has a relationship to a net zero performance, a net zero building. In other words, a net zero building cannot be any shape or it cannot be any material. There are certain parameters that helps you achieve that more efficiently. It is true that you can have the most energy consuming building. I'm going to call it a data center. That's like, mining Bitcoins or something like this. And you could, in theory, achieve net zero, but we don't think that's the spirit, right? The spirit is really to minimize the energy use, to really be thoughtful around how you work, what times of the day you actually are using a space. And there's a lot of things you don't even realize it on the control side. Smart building, quote unquote, that's used to be a very vogue thing to talk about. But the massing, the form factor, absolutely plays a big part of how you achieve net zero in a way that's more linear and efficient and optimized. Yeah. I think when it comes to the interior of buildings of net zero, for us, we realize that the buildings change, right? We're talking about now these days like office buildings that now needs to solve the housing crisis. That's very much of a thing. So even when you think through that, we accept the fact that maybe Bloomberg Center one day will be something else besides an academic building. So we very much had that idea that it will change. We are naive in thinking that this building will not change in 5, 10. I mean, I don't even know what's going to happen in 1 year. I mean, AI will be taking over my job. So who knows, So from an interior point of view for us is really about, it's really guided by the user experience and solving the problem of how you use that in the current times that you're using it. But using simple things like a structural grid that's 30 foot by 30 foot. It's very flexible. You can use it for commercial or you can turn it into something else. So the structural modularity has a big impact of how buildings can transform themselves. The quality of daylighting, how much daylighting you get, that really affects the way you can use deeper parts of the plant. So all of those things were considered because the most net zero thing that you can do to a building is allow it to change so you don't have to take it down. Right? You talk about sustainability, but if you talk about sustainability and if you have to demolish the thing and build the most sustainable thing, yeah, it's sustainable, but not really if you're going through that kind of impact. So the whole campus to us was really guided around that sort of fundamental principle. What are the smart things that we do? And again, this isn't anything innovative, right? It's just thinking a little bit ahead of time, understanding that these changes, the curriculum can change. They are teaching computer sciences, and the way that they're teaching computer sciences change day by day. They used to have like these big server things in computer science that servers no longer needed. It's all kind of in the cloud. So it changes. And for us, the answer was tomorrow it's going to change. There may be interior reworking, but the system, the infrastructure, the modularity of the building allows you to do whatever you want. Yeah.
And I think it's super interesting too, because in your presentation, you mentioned how the envelope, because of its net zero sustainability aspect, you kind of formed the interior spaces around this indirect sunlight and obtaining that in these spaces. So they're very overlapped and integrated. And it's a nice contrast to what the envelope is, which is the perforated pixel-like envelope. So it's super interesting to see that come to fruition.
We had our thesis was that if we use net zero principles in a building, could that interior actually be a better working environment than a non-net zero building? And we were really trying to kind of prove that out, that by making a building highly efficient, by being very smart about where glazing is and how you control electrical lighting through controls, that actually it's a better working environment for you. Because at the end of the day, that's all people care about. That's what happens. You can have a great net zero building. If you're not comfortable, you're not going to come to work, especially in these days with Zoom, right? So we had to prove that thesis really closely because if we couldn't get past that sort of post-occupancy experiential point of view that people want to be there, then it's very hard to create this argument that it's a net zero building. It does all these things, but nobody wants to be there. You know, that's the thing that we were really trying to prove it out. Yeah.
I guess one last follow-up question, because I was listening to what you were saying about all about observing light, right? And how important it is not only for net zero, but also aesthetics and experience inside out, which is great. But I realized I was there in the hotel, in the observatory, or in the bar, restaurant, whatever it is, not too many months ago. And I was looking down, and then we decided to walk through it because it was a beautiful night. And I realized how did you approach the artificial lighting for night? Was there a lot of thought into it, minimal thought into it? Like how did you approach that?
Yeah. On the electrical lighting side, there is just like endless numbers of controls, a lot of zoning. What we had to avoid, and it is a computer tech school, right? So you have guys like drinking Red Bull at 3 a.m. coding or whatever these people do. And if you're there, you don't want to feel that you're kind of alone at 3 a.m. in the middle of nowhere. So how do you deal with the lighting quality at that point? One of the ways that we managed that was, and there's always that case, right? We all know because we're architects, we're always working late at night and you're in a building and there's nobody around and you're the only guy, except that because of you, the whole building is lit. So we had a concept of aggregating program so that if you are there at night, we had these very particular pockets of communal spaces like the atrium and these little areas around the atrium so that if you're coding late at night, instead of going deep into the floor plate and turning all of the things that are zoned control, it's better for you to work on these sort of communal areas. You're working with another person who's there at 3 a.m. You feel more like you're part of this kind of 3 a.m. community. And by the way, we are only lighting that zone and we can actually turn off the area of your actual desk. So we had to think through about these like communal areas because that's where you want to be at 3 a.m., not at my desk. So going back to your interior question, this is where the interior quality, the experiential use, lighting zone, net zero, and everything is just, it's all integrated. It's part of one story because if you can't get that guy to work in the atrium, he's going to go to his desk. Again, you're working against the stream of trying to create optimization and energy efficiency.
Thank you.
I actually have one last question, because I think everybody's curious. Budget. So I'm curious, so you mentioned the exterior insulation outboards, and I can imagine something like that, one of the layers to the many sustainability factors, costs a lot of money, very pricey. I'm just curious, was that in the initial scope of work? And I guess the budget changed tremendously from the beginning to the end and when all these features were incorporated throughout the project?
Yeah, the building is 160,000 square feet. The final cost was 140. I think Cornell is comfortable talking about it now. 140 million, I think. So you do the math. I don't know sort of what, I guess if you bring it up to today's dollars, I'm not sure what that's kind of equal. You know, I would say that there is a premium if you are kind of thoughtful about thermal breaks. There's more detailing. There's a lot more mock-up testing. You have to be a little bit more careful in details. Mechanically, you have systems. It is a premium, but as we all know, these days, it's becoming more quote-unquote standard. I think it's becoming more low-hanging fruit. I'm looking for the day where, and it's getting closer, that every project is net zero and people won't think about it. And hopefully Bloomberg Center helps use some kind of guidance for people to kind of achieve that in an open source kind of way. That would be fantastic. So I do think it costs more, but I want to say that it's not like 2x, right? It's maybe like 10% more because we're being smart. There's a lot of controls. There's a lot of aux sensors. There's a lot of electrical zoning. But I'd say everything else, more insulation, does that cost more? Instead of 10-inch insulation of the roof, you do 17 inches. Is that much more? Not really. Yeah.
'Cause I think also coming out of school, we design these green roofs and all these amazing features, but we're always curious, how much does this actually cost? And it's interesting for you to put that, attach that percentage to it. 10% more is not as drastic as I think most people think it is. And so like you said, to become this new wave of thinking and to implement this would be fantastic. And architecture.
I have to say, when we started the project with Cornell, I was a bit familiar with the sustainability mission of Cornell, having worked on the Gates Hall building. And it was a very interesting experience because as architect, we're so jaded about cost, as we all know. But one of the blue sky metrics that we had when we first worked with Cornell was, hey guys, we're gonna give you a budget, but if we just gave you a energy use budget first, what does it look like? Let's be blue skies about it. And the first 4 weeks really started with that concept, and they really kind of championed that. They knew it was a really big deal. They knew they had a responsibility towards the attitude and kind of set the pace for the rest of the development. So it was a very, very important mission for Cornell. And it was wonderful because for the first time they said, all right, forget the dollars, we're going to get there, but here's your energy currency. This is what you have to design against, and this is what you have to really respect. Let's talk about that first, and then we'll work through the dollars later. That's how the project started.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course.
We'll open it up to questions in the audience. I might just have, I don't know if it's a comment or a question to Jesse and Scott, largely to do with I guess the relationship between how you make great pieces of architecture by challenging convention, by producing architecture that requires mocking up and prototyping and testing, and how effectively, the both of these buildings are a result of at once denying convention and trying to do something wholly unfamiliar and unique, but also then having to go through all the processes and protocols and codes and conventions of getting buildings built. I wonder if you can comment on any of that relationship between familiarity and convention on the one side and innovation and novelty or newness on the other.
Sure. I mean, I think probably I would start with the master plan that we had to work into, which was done by a huge British conglomerate called Halcro.
Mhm.
But the master plan was basically formed around a kind of notion of a historicist postmodern urbanism, which mandated, base, middle, top for towers. So we had to be very creative in the way we argued for the changes we did make, because we really didn't want to do a classical tower. And so, yeah, we inverted everything from the math, but they accepted it. We opened the base up. Instead of a base being a base building on grade, we elevated that kind of element up and then, made a kind of, there were urban questions about connecting the street to a waterfront esplanade. So it became a gateway, markets, and, other kinds of activities under this elevated base. There was also a really nice master plan that OMA did to modify the Halcro plan. And that actually conditioned the height of this two-story elevated podium, because Rem's idea was to have a continuous garden and elevated esplanade along the water from, building to building across the whole master plan. course, they didn't do it,
Hmm.
but our building basically follows an OMA, so no suggestion there. So I think in a way, we had to kind of critically but gently question and also offer other options for the model they expected on the site. And they did. I mean,
Construction and architecture moves at separate paces. We kind of move fast, architects, but construction, when you look at how buildings are put together, yeah, we're talking about like smart building technology, but they're still pouring concrete like they did thousands of years ago. So it's one of those things where I think that the idea of building buildings with a certain kind of complexity is now almost realizable to whatever you want. I was just telling Jesse, I had a trip to Abu Dhabi last month, and I drove by to see the Jean Nouvel museum, that big thing. Oh my God, it blew my mind. Amazing. When you look up, like, how does that come together? Incredible. And then Frank Gehry is doing his Guggenheim right next to it. He makes Jean Nouvel's project look like a 7-Eleven. I'm not joking. I mean, that is incredible. The Frank Gehry Guggenheim is incredible in its scale. And I looked at it and I realized, wow, you can kind of build whatever you want, right? Like any form, any shape, both good and bad. And it's kind of scary because it's sort of, I guess it caught up after a while. It's kind of the technology, the way you fabricate, especially steel. You can use all kinds of tools to kind of be able to kind of get there. I think it is scary in the sense that the parameters or the lane got wider for you to do whatever you want, and you don't have to optimize anything anymore. You can just cook anything and build it, and they'll be able to kind of build it, you know? So that is kind of scary, but it's also kind of full of promise. I think internally for us as an office, we never start a project saying, we're going to be creative this time. Guys, let's be super innovative, you know? It just kind of comes as a process of understanding the problem, understanding the requirements, the costs, you know, looking at the opportunities. And then out of that comes some kind of architecture that we hope will be somewhat creative and innovative, and you'll be kind of interesting and pleasant to be at. So it's to me, it's fairly, I guess, nondescript that way, that we don't start with that big ambition as a goal. We think that through the process that we can just find little nuggets of something new, and then it just kind of evolves from there. I'm the same way Jesse is. A project is never the end. It's just the start of the next thing, and it's the next thing. That's what excites me about the other roof that we're working on, which is net zero, but also water energy zero. So it just keeps going.
yeah, I wouldn't. This is more from my buddy Jeffrey Kipnis on Tom. But I think one of the things which I should be acknowledged is, he's an artist. I mean, that the formal drive in a way preceded the interest in sustainability, but it then meshed beautifully. I mean, he likes layering stuff together. He likes that kind of assemblage, then meshed in an incredible way with these, constraints. And I don't know, but I think it's really important to bring out, from my perspective, the cultural dimension of, of Tom and Morphosis, and that there are other drivers other than, the sustainability that pre-existed.
I mean, in the context of being at a school, it's one of those, and we have a lot of discussion internally these days about how we train new staff, new grads. We talked a little bit about that, and evaluating portfolios and things like this. And the more I think about it, the more there's really one attribute now that I really, really am keen in identifying in any person at any level. and it's hard to measure. And that single measure to me is curiosity. If you're a curious person, I don't need to train you because everything will come as part of that curiosity. But it's a very difficult attribute to find. I learned curiosity and it was triggered through Tom Main, because Tom Main to this day is like the most curious guy. He's like a little kid, you know, like putting everything in your mouth when you're a baby. He's like that with architecture. And it's just it's insatiable and it doesn't stop. And to understand that that's really what drives creativity, innovation, the work, the level of work, the dedication. When I look at the top of the pyramid, it's like curiosity. And these days, to be an architect, it's so easy to be curious because we can build stuff like that. We can like it's pretty incredible. It's pretty incredible. But curiosity, but and it's hard to gauge it. It's hard to find that. Yeah.
I mean, the other thing I would mention, maybe because of my background at Cooper, you know, I took 5 years of figure drawing. Not that I wanted to become a figural artist, but in a way, it's almost like speed skating, training for speed skating, trains your muscles to do, bicycling. So, I think in a way, it's an extremely conservative approach. Like the plastic arts get you involved with very complex form making and description, even beyond projective geometry. And then, so there's a kind of cultural dimension which allows more control when you're, dealing with a tool that can do anything. So I'm very grateful that I had that background because, there is such flexibility now, but then it could go really south.
Well, thank you for your reflections on my tricky question. Are there questions from the audience? Please.
It's fine.
It's for the recording.
Thank you. I like to congratulate you, Tom, bringing such nice practice together on your book. And yeah, Scott and Jesse, it has been an amazing presentation to follow through all the details. I'm a practicing architect, both Istanbul and recently in US, and I can, as much as you described the journey that you were going through in the building process, I think we can only imagine the stories you gone through. And my question is about the idea of your buildings in the future. Like we have seen, we have been these recently. These maybe haven't been the most common thing. We were thinking about these buildings, this kind of complex, very articulated design concept being realized kind of buildings. How do you imagine them being getting older, and how do they take shape in time for your in the near future, let's say? Simply put, how do you like your buildings to be aging?
I think we spoke a little bit about that, at least from the way I look at it is that the building over time will be used very differently. I acknowledge that because it's a school today, it might be something tomorrow, or the way they're using a classroom may be used in a different day tomorrow. So again, kind of understanding that, instilling some level of flexibility and planning, and understanding that things can evolve. Today there's an office, tomorrow there might not be an office. Today we're hybrid, tomorrow we're not. Who knows? And you have to allow the building to sort of go through that process and be able to adapt. I think one thing is, for that reason, I think a lot of the things that when we think about building planning begins at the sort of urban planning level, because no building exists by itself on its own in the middle of like nowhere. It's a participant, it's part of a dialogue, whether it's in Dubai, whether it's in Roosevelt Island. So one of the most important things that we can leave behind and allowing for the building to kind of age, as you mentioned the word age, gracefully, is the attitude of the building towards creating and forming public spaces around it. You know, because again, the building will change for sure. The building will be redefined. There may be an extension, who knows? But if we can use it so that the spaces, the entry, the public type spaces have some connection with the existing infrastructure, street landscape, or some other experiential thing around it, is one way to preserve and making sure that the building, quote unquote, ages well, you know? So that's one way that we look at it. Really, there isn't any building that we work on where we know that sits by itself. It's part of a neighborhood, right? It's part of a fabric. It's part of a streetscape of some sort, and we have to make sure that we're kind of plugging into it. Usually, that's enough. We try to improve it on what's there.
Are there any other questions in the audience? Maybe as we wait, there is a reception that we'll be having just outside here. We have some food and beverages set up where everybody's welcome to join us. If there are no more questions now, then I'd really, well, no.
I just want to say that I'm in awe of your courage to do this work. I think for all of us, it's really hard to, it's tough to make ourselves vulnerable through our work. And I think, and also to do it over the long haul, over projects like these. I'm sure for both of you, there are, occasions when you woke up at night and thought, what the fuck am I doing?
Mhm.
And I think it's just inspiring to see you follow through and are just continuing to take chances with your work, because it is incredibly inventive and experimental, and difficult. And I imagine that for every successful project that we see, there are probably dozens and dozens of experiments that have failed, some built, some not. So, thanks for pushing forward through your work and also sharing it and being with us today. It means a lot to us, and it really, really means a lot to our students too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's a great conclusion. Thank you very much to Jesse and to Scott for joining us today. And really also thank you to Dalton, to Alexandra, Ali, and Adam. Really, thank you so much. And thank you for joining us.